Hi, it's Mr. Ramage, and this video lesson is going to take a look at the case of Sacco and Vanzetti. The year is 1920, America is tense, fearful, and changing fast. The First World War has ended, soldiers are home and jobless, and a wave of strikes sweeps the nation. At the same time, mail bombs have exploded in cities across the country, killing and injuring government officials and business leaders. The country is terrified of anarchists, communists, and radicals, many of whom are recent immigrants. This fear explodes into what historians call the Red Scare. And in the middle of it all, two Italian immigrants, Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, are about to become the symbols of American justice gone wrong. On April 15, 1920, in South Braintree, Massachusetts, a paymaster named Frederick Parmenter and his security guard, Alessandro Baradelli, were carrying a metal payroll box containing more than $15,000, about $250,000 in today's money. Two men ambushed them in broad daylight, shooting both victims to death before escaping in a waiting car. Witnesses saw the killers but gave conflicting descriptions. Some said the men looked Italian, others said they couldn't tell. Weeks later, police arrested Sacco and Vanzetti. They weren't caught at the scene. They were stopped during a police raid on a known radical hideout. When searched, Sacco was carrying a pistol, and both men were in possession of anarchist pamphlets. The police quickly labeled them dangerous foreign radicals. When questioned, the two men lied about where they'd been, not because of the robbery, but because they feared deportation for their political beliefs. Vanzetti later explained, "I knew I was innocent, but I did not tell the truth. I was afraid of the police, afraid of their prejudice." That fear, the fear of being foreign and unwelcome, would haunt every moment of their trial. The trial opened on May 31, 1921, in Dedham, Massachusetts, before Judge Webster Thayer. From the beginning, it was clear that Sacco and Vanzetti faced not only a criminal charge, but also a country's deep suspicion of immigrants. Thayer was known for his hostility to radicals. After the trial, one clerk reported hearing him boast, "Did you see what I did with those anarchist bastards?" Inside the courtroom, the prosecution focused less on hard evidence and more on character assassination. District Attorney Frederick Katzman told the jury that Sacco and Vanzetti were men who hate our government, enemies of our institutions. But when it came to the crime itself, the evidence was shaky. Eyewitnesses disagreed on what the killers looked like. Some described short, stocky men, others tall and thin. Ballistics tests were inconclusive. Later, experts found that bullets introduced at trial had likely been switched to make Sacco's gun appear to match one found at the crime scene. Vanzetti's gun had no connection to the murder at all, and the car used in the getaway, no proof it was linked to either man. In short, no physical evidence tied them directly to the crime. What the prosecution did have was the jury's prejudice. One juror reportedly said during deliberations they looked guilty because they're foreigners. Even as defense attorney Fred Moore brought forward alibis, Sacco was at work, Vanzetti was selling fish in another town, the jury seemed unmoved. Vanzetti later said, "I never committed a crime in all my life. Some sins, but no crime. I have fought against crime, but I have fought for the liberty of all men." After their conviction, the case dragged through the courts for 6 years. The defense filed 7 appeals, pointing out errors, bias, and newly discovered evidence, including confessions from other men who claimed responsibility for the robbery. But Judge Thayer refused every appeal, dismissing the confessions as lies. By the mid-1920s, the Sacco and Vanzetti case had become an international cause célèbre. Writers, artists, and intellectuals joined the protests. The poet Edna St. Vincent Millay wrote to the governor, "I cannot see that these men have had fair play. Their trial smacks too much of prejudice and too little of justice." Even Albert Einstein spoke out saying, "Everything I have read about this case convinces me that these men are victims of an injustice." In 1925, a convicted criminal named Celestino Madieros confessed that he and members of a local gang, not Sacco and Vanzetti, had committed the South Braintree robbery. Still, the judge refused to reopen the case. Governor Alvin Fuller appointed a committee to review the evidence. The committee, made up of prominent businessmen and a university president, ultimately upheld the verdict. Many believe the investigation was a formality designed to calm public anger. On August 23, 1927, Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti were executed in the electric chair. Vanzetti's final words captured both tragedy and defiance. "I'm suffering because I am a radical, and indeed I am a radical. I have suffered because I was an Italian, and indeed I am an Italian. But I'm sure that I have done no wrong." Outside the prison, tens of thousands of protesters gathered. Demonstrations erupted from Boston to Buenos Aires, Paris to Tokyo. For many, the executions proved that American justice had been corrupted by fear and xenophobia. As one editorial in The Nation declared, this was not a trial of murderers, it was a trial of foreigners. 50 years later, in 1977, Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis issued a formal statement exonerating Sacco and Vanzetti, saying their trial had been marked by prejudice against foreigners and political radicals. He concluded, any disgrace should be forever removed from their names. But the lessons remain deeply relevant. In times of fear, whether during the Red Scare of the 1920s or debates about immigration and security today, justice can bend under pressure. We see it in discussions about border policies, surveillance of minority communities, and the treatment of political dissenters. Like Sacco and Vanzetti, many today still find themselves judged not by what they've done, but by who they are and what they believe. Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter, who studied the case as a young professor, later wrote, "The trial was permeated with hostility to foreigners and skepticism of radicals. It is impossible to believe that men in such an environment received impartial justice." The Sacco and Vanzetti case forces us to confront a difficult question. How do we balance security and justice, fear and fairness, when our nation feels threatened? History shows that when fear rules the courtroom, truth is often the first casualty. Thanks for watching this video lesson, and I hope you learned something.